All right, welcome everybody. August 2022, time is moving by. We're past the halfway point of 2022, if you can believe it or not. We're in another heat wave coming through today and yesterday. And things are cooling off tomorrow, it sounds like, for a lovely weekend, temperature-wise. And I am Vivek Chandas, facilitator chair of the Urban Forestry Commission meeting today. Looking forward to our conversation. We have a full agenda. For sure, I know we have several folks set up for public comment, so I'd like to go ahead and just start us off with our public comment right off the bat here. So
Yeah.
I'm asking folks to keep it between, I think Brian, you may have already requested this, keeping it between 1 to 2 minutes so we can get everybody in this little time that we have. And recall that we have other ways of also providing public comments. If you send your emails to Brian, he's really great about sending it all to commissioners for us to keep in mind as we're deliberating going forward. So let me open it up. Who's first on the docket?
Yeah, we've got 4 people who've signed up. Albert, you were the first one to email me, so I'm gonna bring you into the meeting here.
All right, and commissioners, just as Albert's getting set up, remember we don't need to respond. We can respond, though. I'm trying to keep, since we have 4 people, we just kind of note this, and I don't know if we're gonna have too much time to be able to, or any time to be able to respond to folks, just to stay on time here. So Albert, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Albert Kaufman, and I've been living in Portland for 20 years. Before I moved to Portland, I lived in Seattle, where I got involved in urban forestry issues, tree planting. And there, the tree planting was done a little differently. Anyone who wanted trees was given free trees, street trees. And so we used to have tree plantings that would plant hundreds of trees, sometimes 500 trees in a day. And so when I moved to Portland in 2002, I learned about Friends of Trees. And initially I was a little underwhelmed, given that I had just come from a place where we were planting a lot of trees. It seemed like Friends of Trees was a sort of a clunkier version that took longer. People had to buy the trees. There just seemed to be a lot of hurdles, and I was a little bit frustrated, but that was the game in town. And so I got involved with the Friends of Trees. And over the years, I was a neighborhood coordinator in 4 different neighborhoods. I also planted as a volunteer in other neighborhoods. And I am a donor to Friends of Trees, and I help them as well as a consultant, helping with social media and marketing a number of times. And I've also become friends with many of the staff of Friends of Trees over the years, most of whom are not there anymore. But I've been, very impressed with Friends of Trees, and just kind of come to count on Friends of Trees as the main tree planting organization for our city. And I've been very upset and dismayed that it seems like the contract has become a political football, and I really don't understand why the contract with Friends of Trees was severed. I know that there is still some contracts with Friends of Trees going on, but it's really nothing compared to what they previously were doing. Now I look outside and I note the heat intensity going on, and I also just recognize that the amount of community that it was built and could be continuing to be built, the number of children involved in planting trees, and just the general zeitgeist of having an organization like that doing the amazing community building work that they do, let alone the thousands of trees that they plant. I'm very frustrated, and all of the members of my group, We Keep Trees Planting, feel similarly. And if you have any way of getting that contract back in place, we would really like to see that happen. And I think otherwise, if you have a replacement idea that's going to plant 12,000 to 20,000 trees a year, let us hear it, because otherwise it just looks like somebody made a big mistake, and many of us are hoping that it will be corrected. So thank you all for volunteering, and also those who are staff for doing the great work of keeping this place treed. I'm proud to live here. I love our urban canopy, and I generally support all the good work that you're doing.
Thanks, Albert. Noted. Really helpful, and thanks for showing.
I'll just say you're welcome.
I think it's Mel.
I'm sure that was positive.
All right, Meryl Reddish signed up next. She told me she's going to be calling in. I only see one phone number on the attendee list, so I'm going to bring that one in, hoping that's her.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Great.
Hi,
Okay,
Meryl.
I'll make this quick. Hi. So my name is Meryl Reddish, and I want to begin by thanking all members of the Urban Forestry Commission for their volunteer service. I also want to recognize and thank City Forester Jen Cairo and her staff for their accomplishments in managing Portland's urban forest. So I've been in Oregon nearly 20 years, and since that time I have volunteered and served in leadership positions with Oregon Community Trees, the Urban Forestry Commission, the Portland Parks Board, and Friends of Trees, including as chair. I have 20 years of nonprofit experience in executive positions at Tree Utah, a statewide tree planting and community building organization out of Salt Lake City, and for Portland Audubon. During my time in Oregon, I have followed and participated in urban forestry areas in policy, community engagement, and advocacy. My comments are in response to the recent OPB coverage that portrayed urban forestry and specifically City Forester Cairo in a negative light. I found the press coverage disheartening, one-sided, and short-sighted, and I offer a different perspective. I believe in and want good governance, including having it play a proactive and strategic role in improving our lives. Not only do I want Portland to have a robust urban forestry division, I welcome it. City Forester Cairo is leading and building a diverse team of people to manage the science and technology, policy, regulatory, and community outreach programs that are the basis of an effective urban forestry division. These new positions are important and timely for ensuring that Portland's canopy is managed using best practices and innovative approaches. Jen has every right, and frankly, it's her responsibility to address the complex climate and forestry related issues we face by implementing systems to manage this asset. However, it seems to me that there are detractors from other bureaus and from community groups who do not want to see the forestry division add capacity for improving management and tree code compliance. I also welcome the nonprofit sector, including Friends of Trees, to help advance an ambitious agenda for growing and preserving a healthy, resilient urban forest. I am glad that Portland has Jen Cairo as its city forester and Friends of Trees as a recognizable and effective community-based tree planting organization. Both entities and others, including the Bureau of Environmental Services, can and should be successful in their niche and in working together. At the July Forestry Commission meeting, one commissioner expressed concern about Friends of Trees' loss of city funding and their ability to function. And while I can certainly appreciate the predicament that Friends of Trees is in as a result of a significantly reduced contract, it did receive nearly $1 million a year for over a decade. I know that the city gave the organization sufficient notice of this change and of direction. It is not the city's responsibility to ensure that Friends of Trees continues to function. That is the responsibility of the board, and they are doing a good job. I believe it's time to move on and away from this limited narrative and engage in a higher level problem-solving discussion around preserving trees amidst increased development, allocating sufficient space for large form trees to mature and thrive, street tree maintenance for low-income and marginalized communities, and winning over elected leaders who will champion the ecological and health benefits of our urban forests. Thank you.
Thanks, Meryl, and good to hear from you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Noted. Let's keep moving, Brian.
Yes, Benjamin, you're up next. And I see two of you in the list, so I'm gonna click the first one, see if that works.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for your time. My name is Benjamin Eyre. I have a lifetime of experience of forest management on family land in the North Woods in the Midwest. I'm a former park ranger and worked in the nonprofit field for 9 years and the son of a city worker. All this is to say is that I understand the importance of strategic planning and of the hurdles of government. That all being said, I do believe we need to be acting with the attitude that the planet is on fire. I assume that you all understand the importance of tree cover. So I want to echo what Albert said and ask, what are you doing to either get this contract back on track, or what is the commission going to do to replace the thousands of trees that would have been planted by Friends of Trees this fall or winter? I appreciate the work you're all doing, and thank you for your time.
Any question that we can come back to for sure? Brian, who's next?
Yeah, we had Rachel. Sorry, Rachel, I'm bringing your last name. Signed up this morning, but I am not seeing them in the list. Rachel, if you're here, can you raise your hand? You might be under a different name. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Hi, my name is Rachel Morris. Of course, I'm going to start off with a huge thank you for all the people volunteering here, as well as staff. I am actually the founder of a nonprofit, and I want to talk to you about why I think Friends of Trees is so important. In my experience, the outcomes of projects done by nonprofits for and with the community have radically different results from projects just done with the city and contractors. Benefits go far beyond significant financial savings. They include things like people feeling ownership, youth involvement, actual community building, education about tree care, and this is really important, a big one, empowerment in marginalized neighborhoods. So instead of things just happening to people, they are actually part of the decision making. Friends of Trees is actually a significant part of the urban forest ecosystem itself. And that ecosystem took years to build, cannot be turned on and off like a switch. And it needs to be treated like the precious resource that it is, as part of the urban ecosystem. Thank you for letting me share.
Thanks, Rachel. Appreciate your comments. I think our topics we've all as commission had some opportunity to discuss and will continue to do. So without further ado, and to keep kind of on our schedule, I'd really like to turn our attention to the minutes, which Brian sent out, I think it was just 6 days ago. Hopefully you've had a chance to review the minutes, and like to go forward with our usual check-in. We have the June minutes, so it's not multiple months this time. And thank you again, Ashley, for all the detailed notes in these minutes. Roberta, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Great minutes, Ashley. Just one comment on what I think is page 6. And well, I guess 2 comments. One is, I think it would be great if the pages would be numbered so that we can kind of refer to them more easily, and possibly numbering the bullets, because now I'm going to say, I think it's the second main bullet with the little hollow circle that starts with Title 33, requires preservation of 1/3 of the trees, 12 inches or greater, DBH, et cetera, et cetera. that should be Title 11, I believe. It does refer to the land division requirements in Title 33, but that whole paragraph is really encapsulating really quite well the tree preservation standards in Title 11. And I just wouldn't want someone who isn't as familiar to read that and misinterpret. So thank you.
Can we, Roberta, you're suggesting that, can we just confirm that it is Title 33 and that's a typo from Title 11?
It is a typo. It's Title 11. Yeah.
Okay, it looks, yeah, thank you, Roberta. It looks like that. Yeah, great. Yeah, helpful.
Thank you.
Any other comments, corrections? Okay. So those of you who are here, I believe, yeah, I haven't looked at the attendance here versus the minutes. I'd love to have a call for a vote. Commissioners. Okay, Bruce.
I propose that we approve the minutes with the edits that have been submitted.
Okay, Brian, were there any other edits, or Ashley, were there any other edits that either of you saw by email?
Bruce emailed a few that added some clarifying details on some of the things that were just discussed. Yeah.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table. Seconds.
Second.
Okay, Roberta seconds. Okay, just call the vote. All in favor, virtual or physical hand? Okay, any opposed? Okay, any abstentions? Okay, Megan, Daniel noted. Thank you. Believe that passes. If you raise your virtual and physical hand, I didn't count you twice. So great. Thank you all. June minutes. All right, Jen, can I turn it over to you for Forester's report?
Yes, you may. Good morning, all. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. I've had a heck of a morning with internet connectivity, so fingers crossed. Good morning, commissioners. It's great to see you. Thank you, as always, for your volunteer service to the city and our trees and community. I have, hopefully, if time permits, 9 items for you today. First up, today's agenda, as you certainly have seen, includes heritage tree items. One of the Forestry Commission's roles is recommending the listing, delisting, and removal of heritage trees to City Council for Council's decision. I wanted to let you know that last week, another heritage tree event that's relevant to the Forestry Commission occurred. There isn't time to fit that into this month's meeting. So I'm making you aware of it now in my report, and next month we'll have it on the agenda for a more detailed presentation and requesting Forestry Commission action. That event that happened was Heritage Tree 332, number 332, which is a red oak, was approved for emergency removal by Urban Forestry last week due to its hazardous condition after it had suffered a major failure that our Urban Forestry team actually also responded to. It was a failure that affected public right-of-way. So more details on that next week, but unfortunately we have lost one of our heritage trees. Second item, I wanted to give you an update on Streets 2035. That is the streets design master plan type of project that's being led by the Bureau of Transportation and has been going on now for over a year. And you all have had a couple briefings on that from PBOT staff. I wanted to let you know that that work continues, and Urban Forestry's role, as always, includes representing trees, enforcing tree retention and planting requirements from Title 11 in the project, and advocating for more trees and more tree space in the project. At present, Streets 2035's interbureau team, there are members from all of the infrastructure bureaus, including our urban forestry folks, are working to clarify city requirements for right-of-way, since there are many requirements for the rights-of-way in the city, public rights-of-way, and identifying where conflicts in those requirements exist. and how to resolve those conflicts, including through things like requirement exception processes. So that's one of the tools that's being looked at to address where there may be conflicts. The project now is also working on creating public-facing integrated requirements so that permit applicants, for example, somebody who's developing a property that has adjacent public right-of-way, can better understand the requirements and any exception processes that they may need to or want to undertake. Moving on to the third item, I wanted to give you a heads up that it's that time of year when budget development for the next fiscal year is coming into full swing. It's really all year round, but we're coming to the phase now where this will be on an upcoming commission agenda. In fact, it's tentatively scheduled for the September meeting next month. And this will be for fiscal year 23-24, which begins next July 1st. Remember, that's a midsummer begin and start for these fiscal years. And that development work that we're doing that you'll be hearing about next month includes prioritizing allocations of the Parks Operations Levy funds to produce the outcomes that Portland voters approve. And those include, as you surely will recall, developing Portland's first ever proactive park tree maintenance service, updating the Portland Urban Forest Management Plan, increasing tree planting, creating tree code compliance and enforcement capacity, increasing community engagement and partnerships, and there are some other items as well. We'll go into the details again next month. The commission specifically advises on budget according to city code. So this topic is planned for our next agenda meeting so we can present what our thoughts are and get your feedback and input before it proceeds in the process. And related, an update on Parks and Recreation's Sustainable Future project is also planned for our September agenda. And I know you all have been briefed on that in the past, and we recently had a request to hear about Sustainable Future again. That project, especially for commissioners who are newer, specifically includes identifying funds for the city to assume financial responsibility for street tree maintenance. Street tree maintenance is currently the responsibility of the adjacent property owner to the street tree, and this policy is a known barrier to street tree care, health, retention, and planting, and a burden particularly on low-income property owners. So this policy can be perpetuating canopy inequity, and we would love to see it change. So we'll be looking for your input on that as well next month. Fourth item, the manager over the Bureau of Environmental Services, BES, tree planting program is retiring in September. Therefore, the managers in Parks, Urban Forestry, and BES are aiming to have a written document regarding the Bureau's tree planting coordination completed prior to that departure. And we are planning to present that information together to the commission once it's completed. So you've heard a lot about the coordination. There's been a lot of work around coordination between BES and Urban Forestry. And there have been a couple of processes, including one that Vivek chaired. And one of the outcomes of that is creating this agreement. So we're hopeful that we'll get that finished very soon and to you soon as well. Reminder that BES's tree planting program focuses now on commercial, industrial, and multi-unit private property trees, and Urban Forestry's on street, publicly owned, and private properties. Fifth item, another current focus is improving the city's tree emergency response system. That is another levy deliverable from the Parks levy. Urban Forestry provides the city's 24/7 emergency service for tree-related hazards in public roads and city-owned properties. Our current efforts to improve that include developing an interim software system and more directly integrating tree emergency services into Parks' overall emergency services and incident command system structure. About the software, interim software, some of you may recall, you've heard about this before, but at present, a significant part of Urban Forestry's work, including emergency tree work, is done on paper rather than software. And one of the Parks levy deliverables is to have a competent software system to replace that, since that will take a fair bit of time to identify and implement. Right now, we're working on whether there's an interim solution to be had with existing software elsewhere in our Bureau. So that's important work that's taking some important staff time too. And let's see. Oh, and that would also, the improvements we're working on in the emergency response system will also hopefully impact our single point of contact for trees. That's 823-TREE, trees at Portland.gov. Currently, when we have large storm events like we had on April 11th, we get so many requests for service that it creates a backlog of regular work with our tree SPOC. And so having some ownership and leadership from the Bureau and some help with that work, as well as software, will help with those response times and prevent future backlogs. Let's see, last couple things. There are several recruitment and hiring processes underway, and that's been the case for almost over a year, a little over a year now, thanks to the Parks Operations Levy. The positions are essential to implementing levy deliverables, some of which I mentioned before. One of those recruitments that I wanted to highlight is a new tree maintenance operations manager will start in September. The previous manager left us after over 10 years, over 11 years of service, excuse me, in January. So we're looking forward to the new manager arriving in September. And another new team member very recently started, and this is our first ever urban forestry planning and policy lead, and that is Belinda Judelman. Belinda, maybe you'd like to say hello.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. My name is Belinda Judelman, and I'm so excited to be a part of the city's urban forestry team. And one of my sort of key tasks to begin with will be working on updating the urban forestry management plan. So I'm excited to work with you all on that effort. It's great to meet you all.
Thank you, Belinda. Now I know Judelman. Got it. That's how new things are. So again, this Belinda's role is a position and a capacity we have never had before. So we're really excited. Other things that Belinda will be leading on include future tree code amendments, projects like Streets 2035 that you just heard about, parks planning, various types of planning and policy initiatives that come up every day that affect trees. Finally, I want to let you know that Portland General Electric is seeking changes in state and local regulations regarding vegetation management around electrical utility lines, and that's part of their wildfire risk management work. So at present, the City Office of Intergovernmental Affairs, the City Attorney's Office, Parks, and Urban Forestry are involved in this because it pertains to trees and other vegetation near power lines. That completes my report. Vivek, you'd asked for what's going on in the city right now, so I tried to go a little broad. I hope that was helpful. And if anyone has requests for future reports, as always, you can ask now or send those ideas to Brian and I. We'll see if we can follow up on them. And I'll be happy to take any questions if you have them right now, if there's time.
Hey,
Is there time?
Melinda, go for it.
Just a really quick question about the street tree initiative. Does that limit what the private owners can do with their street trees at all, or is it more of a collaboration?
I'm sorry, Melinda, could you ask that again?
For the street trees, the initiative, does that limit what the private owner can do with the street trees?
So what we're doing right now, it actually doesn't even get to that level, Melinda. It's trying to identify funding so that the city could make sure that maintenance that currently doesn't happen would happen. But we did do a study with a consultant on how that would look, like what it would cost and how that would look. And one of the provisions in that study, so basically the plan for how this would happen if funding is identified, is the city would come along and do the maintenance, there would be communication and that sort of thing. However, there would also be still a permit process similar to the one that's in place now for adjacent property owners who choose to do that tree work, pay for and have that tree work done on their trees. Does that help?
Yep.
Great.
I see Megan's hand.
Jen, my question was just if you have any additional updates about the city's approach or maybe to outreach around, I don't know, around just Emerald Ash Borer. I know you gave an update last month, but I've just been getting more and more questions about it. So I've looked at the resource page and the website, but I didn't know if there's any further thoughts about that. And Bruce, I think, oh, okay, you got it.
Yes. Thanks, Megan. Lots going on there, as there should be. I'm glad that you've seen some of that information. How about we put that over to the next report or future agenda item, because there's a lot we could talk about there.
All right, Bruce.
Jen, can you share the names of the manager of the tree planting program that is retiring, as well as the operations manager at Urban Forestry, or is that a personnel thing and that's private information?
Oh, it's not private at all. And to clarify, it is, let's see, already retired, not retired, but left the position. Larry McGinnis was our longtime dedicated tree maintenance operations manager. And he left tail end of December, early January. And the new manager coming in after a robust recruitment and selection process, his name is Paul Anderson. Paul will be starting in the second half of September.
Okay, and how about for BES, the manager of the tree? Is that Dawn or is that Genoa?
Neither. That's Marvita Redding.
Oh, okay.
All right. Thank you, Jen. Not seeing any hands. I will just also
Can't hear you, Vivek.
Position. Great to see former advisees taking on. Let me see if this works. I just want to welcome Belinda personally, because it's great to see former advisees taking on positions that they have been thinking about for a long time. I actually recall a presentation that Belinda gave in one of my classes in 2014 about the value of parks, and a hedonic regression paper that she had presented in that class. So it's great to see folks continuing their passion and doing the work that they've long sought. So welcome and congratulations and good luck. Lots of work ahead. I hope my internet is coming through reasonably well with my video off, so I may keep my video off for a bit of this, but I'd like to, just since I see no other hands up, and thanks for keeping to the time, Jen, I'd like to pivot to our recap of our retreat. As you recall, one of our agenda items for the meeting today was to get into the a UFC retreat recap. You remember back several months ago in June, we talked about the priorities. The part of our retreat was to bring us together physically in the space. We met in Leach Botanical Garden. Most of you were able to join, and there's others who are here that were not available or aren't here today. Nevertheless, we have some materials, and I'd really like more than anything else. And Brian, I think I'm on this docket, even though I didn't have a name for it. I think I'm the responsible for this. Is that right? Okay. Don't want to overstep here. But Brian also sent out materials on about 6 days ago about the retreat. And it was both a summary that we had Urban Forestry put together, as well as some priorities that had emerged from the this year's workshop. And thank you, Brian and Ashley, for putting all that together. And Twee, of course, former Urban Forestry Commissioner, was our facilitator. And hoping you had a chance to at least look at some of the ways in which we had kind of captured those discussions. You might have memory of other conversations that weren't necessarily captured here. And my real wish here is to figure out, we have a list of priorities, and we have kind of a lot of material that we covered at the retreat. And I was really hoping more than anything else for us to maintain some momentum on this work. It was great to get together, of course, seeing all of you in person, breaking bread together as we did over lunch. I'd really like to find a way for us to keep that momentum going. So while we have these materials in front of us, the kind of key question I have is really, do these priorities reflect we have right now 5 priorities set up, and thanks again for summarizing those. Do these priorities reflect your understanding of where we left that retreat discussion? That's question number 1 that I have for you. Is there anything missing? I mean, sub-questions might be, is there anything missing from this list? Are you able to describe things in more specificity with this priority list? And there were several additional, from those 5 priorities, there were several additional issues that were raised. So I really want to check in with you all to see, are we do we have a similar North Star on this in terms of identifying the priorities? Just to recall, and those of you who didn't get these materials, let me just read these priorities off for you. And these are not necessarily, I don't think we ordered these as in like the top priority. I think these are kind of in a basket and they're not necessarily ordered yet. So one of the priorities is increasing the urban community. That was identified as allies in the community, outreach, community listening versus education. Another priority was identifying high priority changes to Title 11 and advocate for substantive project to begin as soon as possible for kind of moving forward on those high priority changes. And again, this one had to do with what the community wants, since commissioners are really trying to get a pulse on what communities are, community members that you're in touch with are interested in. This is an area that we really want to be spending some time understanding what are the Title 11 changes that we might want to put forward. Another priority was updating urban forestry management plan. And since Belinda's here, also you can kind of hear this. This is something the commission is really interested in, wanting to move forward on and supporting you and forestry and doing that work effectively with the community. Another priority was advocating for for city maintenance of street trees, and trying to figure out what are ways to do to develop equitable distribution of street trees, what are policy bottlenecks that might be in place, and compelling city council to identify funding priorities and kind of really moving forward on that. Oh, thank you, Brian. And then finally, review and update the structure of urban forestry. So this was something I was proposing as thinking about the committee structures in response to these priorities, as well as kind of a leadership role of potentially co-chair model. My time is up in February, as I understand it, of 2023. That's 6 months away. So I would love to figure out a succession plan for that, of how I can kind of roll off of this position and hand the baton over to someone who could take this on. And so what does that look like? That was 5th priority. So let me stand back. Do these reflect, and there were other issues raised, like assessing effectiveness of UFC and impacting bureaus and plans, determining how to be more productive in bureau policy projects, developing process for proactive involvement in policies, and that comes from not being reactive to policies, but more proactive, creating more UFC conversations with city bureaus, commissioners, advisory groups like the Planning Sustainability Commission, Utility Commission, etc. Reserve agenda time for action plans rather than reactive work, similar to the earlier one, and then structuring how plans and policies come to the UFC and allowing more time for review and discussion. So let me deep breath, and while I'm doing that, maybe you can highlight, does this resonate? Anything off with this list? Roberta, I see your hand up. We can go around let's go around the room, so everyone, you can pass if you want. Let's go around the room on this one. I think it'd be really important to hear from everybody, as I generally like to do. Roberta, why don't you start us off?
Could you scroll up again to priority 1? I'm sorry, just need to, okay, thanks. So I was just looking for this email from Brian and I don't see it. So maybe Brian, you could send it again, because I'm not saying I didn't get it, but I'm not seeing it in my situation here. One topic that we spent some time on, a little bit of time on, but it could potentially be integrated in priority 1 instead of its own priority. And that was the need to really think hard about how we can be part of the discussion about meeting multiple goals for trees, canopy, affordable housing, that those issues are being pitted against each other and that we need to be proactive in and have a role in trying to bring people together to see how, it's sort of trees and housing instead of trees or housing. And we talked about potentially reaching out to the Planning Sustainability Commission or others, and how bringing those issues and also climate change kind of together in a more proactive discussion is going to be important, because right now city council's focus is really a lot on housing and houselessness and homelessness issues, and trees are kind of getting pitted against that. So just wanted to kind of add that, and I think it might warrant its own bullet under number 1 if we want to kind of keep a light on that.
Thank you, Roberta. That I really see that as maybe tying into like even a specific, it may even be a thread that goes through like priority changes, Title 11. It could be related to urban forestry management plan.
True, yeah.
Could have many touch points across these priorities. So thank you for bringing that up. Let's go around. Melinda, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I was unable to attend, so I'm just absorbing the contents. I can't bring up anything else.
Okay, sounds good. And yeah, feel free to follow up with any of us and, as well. Daniel, see you next on my screen.
I will pass.
Okay. Megan, and then Bruce, then Ivory.
I think that this captures what we talked about, so that feels good. I think some of the issues listed as additional issues raised actually probably could be incorporated throughout. Like a lot of these items really feel like structure items. So the review and update the structure, like we talked about structure, how plans policies come to the UFC to allow more time, reserve agenda time, like all of that feels structural to me. So I don't even feel like that needs to be additional issues.
Okay.
So I feel like this captures the conversation. I think we should probably digest whether there's priorities we have that weren't included, or for instance, Melinda could take in what she missed and consider whether that was how she feels the priorities are. But yeah, nothing else to share.
Okay, thanks, Megan. Bruce?
I think it's a good list of priorities. I think they'd be most effectively dealt with if we had smaller groups working on each one and then presenting things to us. I think it's very unwieldy for there to be a group discussion on these issues.
Noted. Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, a lot to take in right now. But again, it's a chance for us to just jog the thinking about what are the items and how we can go forward. If we can start on these priorities, then we can start thinking about ways we can dig into them. Ivory, anything coming up for you?
Yeah, I agree. These priorities capture what we touched on during the retreat. So I don't have any further comments.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ivory. Leah?
Yeah, nothing to add. I just want to echo what Roberta said. I think the issue of housing is one of the probably the most important right now, to really make sure that's like strongly represented in these priorities. And hopefully when we have new commissioners, this is something we can hand them to say, here's what is going on. So that'll be good too.
That's great. So just a quick response to that, it's like, I really do. I think with this particular item of kind of reaching out to bureaus and connecting, I don't know who the voluntary commission is for BD at Bureau of Development Services, but I imagine with housing as being a priority, there's another touch point for us to be able to kind of check in terms of this outreach and proactive and these terms that are coming up. Jen? No?
I can hold it for the conversation about that later. Thanks, Vivek. I was going to answer your question, but we can do it later.
Okay. All right. So this was really all I wanted to check in with y'all in terms of getting a read of the room in terms of follow up. I'd like to maybe really as a way to kind of keep this conversation going and then keep this into 2023 as new kind of a new structure emerges for the Urban Forestry Commission. with my stepping down and new commissioners coming on board, et cetera, part of what I'd like to do is just have this list, like have this list immediately accessible. I mean, I'm going to be tattooing this on my forearm later today, so it's always on my mind, but not expecting any of you to do that either. Nevertheless, it is something that we need to have, and I'd like to have, for us to keep the conversation going about where we are, what our agenda is, and how we can keep bringing this up during our commission meetings and making steady progress on each of these items. So Development Review Advisory Committee, DRAC, of course, that's right. Thanks, Brian. So unless there's anything else coming up for folks on this item of UFC recap, that was kind of the high level approach to this. I know there's probably lots of details we can dig into, but I also want to save time for this Heritage Tree Program overview, which anything else coming up with this retreat?
Can I ask
recap?
just a quick question? Yep. I'm curious, like, I know you're saying that we're wanting to move it forward, and don't tattoo it, or, you know, do botany interpretation or something, but is there a way that we're going to set aside some time at a meeting to discuss how we're going to make this happen? Because I know what it's like to make agendas and priorities and then revisit them a year later and say, well, that was a good list. So I'm just curious if we'll have like a working session around this.
Yeah, and Brian and Jen and I, when we meet, I think this is definitely
I bet that word was challenging.
Conversation. Yeah, so sorry, my internet, it seems unstable, but nevertheless, this is the what conversation, and then the how conversation comes, you know, subsequently. So we're thinking, yes, Megan, totally the how. I'd like to set aside time with Brian and Jen as we're talking about agenda items. Brian, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'll just add in, Megan, thanks for that question. That's something Vivek, Jen, and I talked about specifically when we met to plan this meeting. One thing that's sort of tangentially related to that is there is a new page on the UFC website of the tentative agenda for the next few meetings. We do think we'll have some time in October specifically just to hold space to talk about priorities. But as part of the goal with having the tentative agendas posted is to have time each meeting for the UFC to see what's coming up, talk about that agenda collectively, and be able to be a little bit more involved in what is coming to the UFC so that we can prioritize space to talk about priorities and things like that. So I'll put that link into the chat and start including that in the emails that I send out every month too.
Great, thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. Yeah, let's keep this moving. I'm excited to kind of step off the commission with this kind of priority list. It's not a light lift by any means. So I would be delighted. I would feel like we're kind of got them dialed to our own orientation of what we'd like to be contributing to, and then the structure will follow. So I'm hopeful for that. Great. Let's move into, unless I'm missing anything, let's move into the Heritage Tree program overview, and I'm delighted to invite Nick Desai, who's been responsible for this and has been working with the Heritage Tree Committee and many other moving parts on this. So can I turn this over to you, Nick, to give us an overview as we talked about recently when we met, and then we'll get into Heritage Tree number 265 and 206. And I think if you would be very explicit about what you're looking for from the commission, that would really help us, because I do think there are votes here that we're looking for as well.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Vivek. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Nick Desai. I'm a botanics specialist with our Science and Policy Work Group. And as mentioned, we have a few Heritage Tree items on the agenda today. So I'm going to just jump right in and share my screen. Okay, so, hope you can see the right screen. Can I see a thumbs up? Yes, okay. So we have 3 items on the agenda. We have new commissioners, and we also bring heritage tree items to the Urban Forestry Commission occasionally. So this is a refresher and also an opportunity just to provide a brief overview of our program. I'm sure that none of you have this information tattooed on your forearms, so the reminder is here today. I will be joined by Rebecca Chrysoulis and Dylan Saito. Rebecca is our non-development permitting and regulation supervisor, and Dylan is our non-development tree inspector. They'll be joining me for later parts of today's presentation. So first, we're going to begin. Here's an overview of our agenda for the next 50 minutes. We will begin with an overview of the Heritage Tree Program to cover program background very briefly, and a focus on the components which involve the Urban Forestry Commission. Then we'll move into a public hearing for the request to remove heritage tree number 265, and then a request to remove designation of heritage tree number 206. In the overview, I hope to answer any questions that you may have about your role in these requests and how they differ. So the very brief background on the Heritage Tree Program. Heritage trees are trees that have been formally recognized by City Council for their unique size, age, historical, or horticultural significance. Once accepted by Council, heritage trees are designated with a plaque and listed in the Heritage Tree Database. Most importantly, heritage trees receive the highest protection of any tree in the city. They must be preserved, and there is a steep penalty for removal, damage, or injury. Each year, trees are nominated. Anyone can submit a nomination. Nominated trees can be on public or private property. If on private property, the property owner must consent to the nomination. To be considered, trees must be in the city of Portland. They must be non-nuisance species. They must be in good health with enough room for roots and canopy to grow. A fairly new criteria is that they must be visible to the public, and of course, they must have a special quality. Once designated, heritage trees cannot be removed without consent of the Urban Forestry Commission or have their designations removed without City Council approval. And here is the text from Title 11 about the process for designation. Essentially, it says the UFC makes a recommendation to City Council as to whether a tree should be designated as a heritage tree. A recommendation to designate a tree shall be supported by at least 6 members of the UFC. City Council may designate a tree if it finds that the tree's aerial space and open ground area for the root system have been certified as sufficient by an arborist. We're not talking about nominations today, but some of you have been involved in the nomination process in the past, but I highlight this section of code because it informs us of what to look for in a designated tree. All urban forestry work groups are involved in administration of the Heritage Tree Program. The Science Outreach and Planting Work Group manages the program and serves as staff liaison to the Heritage Tree Committee. That's my role. Tree inspectors conduct inspections and issue permits. And the Operations Work Group is involved with maintenance and emergency removals of heritage trees in the right-of-way and on city property. The Heritage Tree Committee, this is an older photograph, assists with the program by reviewing nominations and providing recommendations to the UFC, public education and outreach, and also installation of plaques, adjustment of plaques, conducting remeasurements, and generally kind of keeping an eye on the heritage trees in our system. Historically, we've had an urban forestry commissioner or 2 serving on the UFC and chairing the committee as well. However, with the recent departure of Damon Schrosk and Greg Everhart from the UFC, we currently have no commissioners on the committee. Title 11 directs the Urban Forestry Commission to be involved with the heritage trees in 3 distinct ways. 1 is reviewing nominations, which we just covered. 2, reviewing requests for removal of a tree, and 3, reviewing requests for removal of designation. And there's an important distinction there, which I hope to make clear over the next few slides. Title 11 also directs City Council very specifically with 2 distinct responsibilities: designating heritage trees and removing designation of heritage trees. Now, I talked about tree removal scenarios, both removal scenarios. So this is just tree removal. Both of these scenarios are described in Title 11. The first is heritage trees may be removed only with the consent of the UFC, except as provided in subsection 1, which is listed below. So for a tree removal request, the UFC shall hold a public hearing on a request to remove a heritage tree. Consent to remove the tree shall be supported by at least 6 members of the UFC. So that's the first case that we will be involved with today. And at the bottom of this slide, it shows what the procedure is for an emergency. If city forester determines that a heritage tree is dangerous and is a threat to public safety, the city forester may order the tree to be removed without prior consent from the UFC. A good example is the tree that Jen Cairo described in her forester's report, which we will be discussing next month. Now, once a tree is removed, generally what happens is the Urban Forestry Commission recommends removal of designation to council. If council agrees with the recommendation, then the plaque is removed from the tree is removed from the heritage tree database, and the tree becomes an ordinary tree subject to the regulations of Title 11. And I guess I'll back up and say, if the tree has already been removed, the plaque, of course, is non-existent, but the tree is removed from the heritage tree database. In most cases, removal of designation has occurred after the UFC has either retroactively approved the emergency removal of the tree by Urban Forestry, as with the case Jen described earlier, or the UFC has already approved the property owner's request to remove the tree for public safety. And that's the case that we'll be looking at shortly. So just as a reminder, we will first look at the request for tree removal. That's heritage tree number 265. And then we'll be looking at the request for removal of designation number 206. I'll pause before we go into these topics and ask if anyone has any questions that I can clarify at this moment. Okay, I see no hands. So we shall move on. Okay, so this now enters the public hearing for heritage tree number 265, request for tree removal. This is a hardy dove tree. It's located in the Laurelhurst neighborhood, and it's a private tree. It's on private property. What has occurred so far? The property owner submitted a removal request of the heritage tree. The tree was in decline and the property owner had concern for safety. This removal request has triggered notice of public hearing at the UFC per Title 11, as I mentioned before. Following that, the Urban Forestry team, specifically our permitting and regulation team, conducted an initial inspection. The initial inspection, which Dylan Saito is going to review with you, found that the tree was in decline and that it was a concern. This triggers a second set of inspections with Urban Forestry supervisors and managers, and then we proceed with the public hearing. Now, this is the public hearing. So this is the run of show for the public hearing. Dylan's gonna provide the condition assessment and staff observations. We'll have a little bit of time for public testimony, submitted or orally. Then there'll be an opportunity for commissioners to discuss, ask any questions, and then the recommendation is for a commissioner to make a motion either to approve removal request and recommend removal of designation to City Council, or to deny the removal request. Now, if A, then the vote to remove the tree and recommend removal of designation to City Council must be supported by at least six members of the UFC. And I just want to clarify here. So generally we consider a request to remove and then a removal of designation to City Council. If you are approving the request to remove, it makes sense then to tie that with the removal of designation to City Council for efficiency. That's my recommendation. And so just as a reminder, heritage tree removal, I know I'm repeating myself here, but I think that it's important just to go over this. As per Title 11, heritage trees may be removed only with the consent of the UFC. Public hearing on request to remove the tree and consent must be supported by at least 6 members of the UFC. And I've also included the definition of a dangerous tree because that is a consideration when we're looking at a removal request. Dangerous tree is one where the condition of the tree presents a foreseeable danger of inflicting damage that cannot be alleviated by treatment or pruning. The tree may be dangerous because it is likely to injure people or damage vehicles, structures, or developments such as sidewalks or utilities. And that is from Title 11 definitions. Now I'm going to turn it over. I'm sorry, it's not Dylan right now. It's Rebecca who's going to be sharing the staff assessment for the dove tree. Rebecca.
Good morning, commissioners. It's an honor to be here to discuss the findings from the heritage tree removal permit request. So I'll be going into the details while we consider the photos that are in front of you. In photo A, this was taken from 2012. The tree was designated as a heritage tree in 2004, and it's been declining ever since its designation. 7 pruning permits have been issued over the years to address dieback in the canopy of the tree. Inspections by urban forestry staff have determined that this permit request from the property owner is warranted. As you can see in photo B, which was taken 10 years later, we have the decline in canopy visible. There is missing bark, discoloration, and decay of wood that can be seen throughout the stem of this tree. And so photo C, taken back in 2012, is showing the trunk base 10 years ago. Next slide, please. Photos D and E now show the trunk base 10 years later. And you can see the missing bark, the discolored wood, and the decay. Decay was found around 35 to 40% of the circumference of the base of this tree. We used a probe on our second inspection with the leadership team to check, if decay had spread into the root system. The probe itself was 46 inches long, and we were able to insert the probe 21 inches deep into the base of this tree. So this helped us understand that the overall vigor, health, and structure of the tree is in advanced irreversible decline. Next slide, please. Again, tree is in an advanced state of decline as shown in the photos previously. There is concern for the safety of the residents and the property owners, especially the neighbor who abuts the property next to the fence where the tree is located. And so code, again, as Nick gave a nice summary of in the beginning, states that 1140.040 dying trees is where the tree is in an advanced state of decline because it is diseased, infested by insects, rotting, cannot be saved by reasonable treatment or pruning, or must be removed to prevent spread of the infestation or disease to other trees, or is imminently likely to become a danger or die. Next slide, please. And so at this point, I will turn it back over to Nick.
Thank you, Rebecca. So now for the remaining time for this item, we will open up the floor to public testimony. Vivek, I'll let you chair that piece of it. And I will offer, as in this public testimony realm, that the Heritage Tree Committee supports this request. Most committee members, including our chair, Greg Everhart, are familiar with this tree and have been keeping an eye on its decline over the past few years. They have reviewed the photographs and evidence from the urban forestry staff, and they have also, some members have looked at this tree. This tree is actually in a backyard. I mentioned that visibility to the public was a relatively new eligibility criteria. This tree is not entirely visible, but you can see it from the street. And so, Vivek, I'll let you chair the testimony, but then we'll move into the urban forestry discussion and questions and your motion. So I'll turn it over to you to manage that piece of it.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Brian, I don't know if we had people sign up for this as we do with general public testimony, though I do notice that there are attendees that aren't commissioners here as well. So if attendees are able to or are interested in offering any feedback on this particular, now's the time.
Yeah, I don't see anyone's hands raised. So if there's no public comments, we can move into the UFC part of it.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions, reactions, or suggestions about this request? Bruce, I see your hand up.
A few questions. Was the decay at the base of the tree on the side of the tree where you have the apparently living branches? That's question one. Is there a way to reduce the height of the tree so it would no longer be a safety hazard to the neighbor? That's question two. And those are my questions.
Yes, so let's see. Decay was seen around the base of the stem. That was on the south side. These are good questions. And then a majority of the east side branches had been removed due to dieback or death. And then at this point, because there is it was a simple probe that was done of the root system, essentially checking for the footing of the tree. But it is concerning that, with the probe at that most decayed point, we were able to insert that probe almost 2 feet into the base of the tree, under the tree. So, normal healthy root structure would not allow you to insert a probe even really an inch at the base of a tree like that. It's kind of, the metaphor I make is like footing, concrete footing underneath a fence post, even though roots are not concrete. So not sure that answers your question, but hopefully it does.
All right, Roberta?
Yeah, thanks. My question is, what process, or when you notify for a public hearing in this context, who gets notified of the public hearing, and in what time frame prior to the hearing?
Sure. There is a posting that goes up outside of the property saying that there is a public hearing that will be taking place. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that.
And I believe that I believe the time frame is 45 days. So notice that's posted saying that there's a heritage tree. There's a request to remove a heritage tree on this property.
Correct.
So
And
it's, so it's just on,
the posting gives the time and the date of the Urban Forestry Commission meeting.
okay, so it's just on the site. There's no mailing or anything or emailing or anybody notified that way. It's all on the site is where the notice of
Well,
hearing.
correct.
occurs.
I mean, we wouldn't have, I'm not sure, we wouldn't have residential emails to send. So that would be the best way to get it out in the neighborhood.
I guess it's also on the agenda too of the Forestry Commission. So if someone's watching, they would be. Okay, I just was curious. Thank you.
Sure. Oh, but Bruce, to go back to your question, pruning treatments at this point, because there's so many cavities and diebacks, different point in the stem, there wouldn't be a good option to prune back to really. And this tree has a lot of defects at this point.
Daniel?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Nick. Always good to get a refresher on this. I mean, this to me looks like a pretty clear case of, you know, a lot of dieback and a lot of disease. I think this is a lot clearer than some of the cases that we get before the commission, but I do have just a general question. When I was looking at the 2012 and the 2022 photos, it looked to me like in 2012, the central bowl was much more intact, and that over time, the central part of the tree, you know, has been decayed and dying back. And I've seen this in some other heritage tree cases we've had where, you know, clearly the tree was designated at one point because of the original structure. And then over time, as things start to die back, and that original structure that provided the designation is no longer there, it kind of raises a question for me about, you know, should a tree continue to be a heritage tree at some point when it's had so much pruning, so much cutting back that doesn't look anything like it does when it was first designated? And I'm just wondering if those kinds of considerations ever come up when you're having these discussions about heritage tree removal.
I think that's a great point. I'm relatively new, and so this is the first heritage tree presentation I've been involved in. But I think that, I guess, encompassing that, like breaking away the removal from the delisting, I think the delisting process we have would potentially be something that might address what you're speaking about, Commissioner Newberry.
Thank you. I'm not advocating any policy change or anything. It was just something I noted, and I thought that was interesting. Maybe at some point might be worth a discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Anything else on this? I agree, Daniel. It looks like a pretty compelling case. So I think what we need to, unless I see any other hands, I'm going to ask for a motion. It sounds like Megan, do you have a hand up?
Well, and my question was, I agree that it seems pretty straightforward. I'm just curious if this was the only hardy dove tree. From just my previous work, I know we don't have a lot of hardy dove trees, and so it almost makes me think about like just the record or having a space where we can talk about trees that have been delisted in a way to kind of recognize them even once they're gone, particularly if it's a tree that we see so infrequently, which I personally, and I could be wrong, but I feel is the case with a hardy dove tree.
I can field that. Thank you, Megan. That's a really good question. And I should mention that our Heritage Tree Committee Chair, Greg Everhart, was traveling this month, and so she could not be here. But she did provide me with some information to share with you, which is that we do have, including this one, there are 2 hardy dove trees in the Heritage Tree program right now. The Heritage Tree Committee takes removal requests very seriously and very carefully considers them. And it is hard to lose one of two trees of this species from our program. But the situation was such that the committee itself felt like the removal request was warranted. And I really do like your idea of memorializing the trees that are removed as designation. And I think we'll take that into consideration, maybe posting some information about the tree on the website that we have. I really like that idea. And opening the space, maybe, sending out the word, hey folks, look out as you're nominating new trees. Look, we need some more hardy dove trees. We just lost one. So it's a great idea.
Okay, thanks, Megan. Thanks, Nick. All right. Motion, Bruce?
I move that we approve, is it the delisting? Is that what we recommend delisting of heritage tree number 265?
You are approving the removals.
Okay.
It's confusing. The UFC has the ability to approve and authorize removal and then also make a recommendation to delist to city council.
Okay.
Two-step process.
I recommend, I make a motion that we approve the removal of heritage tree number 265 and that we recommend to city council that they approve the delisting of heritage tree number 265.
Okay, very clear. Thanks, Bruce. Second?
I'll second that.
Leah, thank you. All in favor, virtual or physical hand up? Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so moved. 265, RIP.
Okay, thank you, commissioners. Now we'll move on to heritage tree number 206, request for removal of designation. Now this is a cherry tree, Prunus avium, which is located also on private property. This one, like the other, is in a person's backyard. And again, as I mentioned, one of our newer criteria is visibility to the public. This one is partially visible. You do have to go through a gate and look at this tree. And as you can see, it's a pretty big multi-stem tree. It's very old. Now, the process here. So remember, this is not a public hearing. Title 11 does not have direction for a public hearing for a removal of designation. What has happened is the property owner submitted a request delist. In other words, a request to remove designation of the tree. It's a simple form. She provided an explanation and notified us of supporting documents. So as a reminder, as per Title 11, UFC makes a recommendation to City Council as to whether the heritage tree designation should be removed from a tree. A recommendation to remove the designation shall be supported by at least 6 members of the UFC. City Council may remove the designation if it finds that the designation is no longer appropriate. And so that underlined phrase there is what I want you to consider as we look at this tree over the next few slides. Is the designation no longer appropriate? So the process here, UFC will review the request, review supporting documentation. In this case, it's the assessment provided by Urban Forestry, opportunity for discussion and question and answer period. Then UFC motion to either, this is my advice, either recommend removal of designation to City Council or not recommend removal of designation to City Council. And remember that if you are recommending removal of designation, it must be supported by at least 6 members of the UFC. So the question is designation no longer appropriate? Consider whether the tree is in good health. So we'll first review the request by the property owner, then that supporting documentation. I'll provide some information about the review by the Heritage Tree Committee. So the supporting documentation that you received in your packets was from the property owner, Mary Rutt, requesting delist due to poor health and potential hazard. Tree is multi-stem, 80 to 100 feet tall. One stem is leaning slowly but progressively away from vertical. Fungus noted on tree bark base with splitting of bark, which Tree Inspector Dylan Saito said was tree's attempt to heal itself from fungus. When asked for supporting evidence attached to this form, the property owner said see records from General Tree Service Pruning Services coordinating with Heritage Tree Department personnel. We did not receive those records, but we do have our, from our permitting department, the inspection reports and information which Dylan will review with you. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dylan to review the urban forestry staff observations for this tree. Dylan.
Hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Nick, thanks for putting all this together. It's good to see some of you. I recognize some faces in these little tiny computer boxes. That's great. So this tree has a very interesting story in that I've been in it when I was in the private sector. And actually one of our operations managers has also been in it with General Tree. General Tree is the company contractor that has been maintaining this tree for some time, very well. And so it's hard to see through multiple inspections now that this tree has really reached the point of no return. The pruning options are extremely limited and very severe, which is kind of what's brought us here today. Speaking with Mary, the property owner, about her passion for this tree, it really showed when she purchased the property specifically to keep this tree and then designate it. So with all that being said, we definitely, we made sure to take our time to do a very thorough inspection from the ground to make sure that there were no other options, other than to delist this tree because of the rate of decline that we're seeing in it. So in this photo, you're going to kind of see sort of the start of the senescence in the crown, which is basically just some dieback. It's fairly typical in a lot of mature trees, just really depending upon the weakest points of the tree. Sometimes it has to do with phototropism, so wherever the sun is really able to reach this tree. As Nick was saying, it is a backyard tree, so you can really only see, I guess, is the top 10 to 15 feet of it from the street, because it is a raised property off of Southeast. So it's very difficult to see from the public right away. But once you get into the backyard, you start seeing a lot of large gaping holes in the canopy. And it's not due to failure as much as it is just the overall health and decline and vigor of the tree. And when we look at, especially as an arborist, this variety of cherry tree, which is a sweet cherry variety, they're typically extremely vigorous. And then they usually do have a pretty sudden dieback characteristic that we've seen, notably more especially in the last 5 years with this extended drought and then the heat domes that we've had and storms, etc. But the biggest concern here is that since it's a multi-stem tree and where the union starts, which is basically at 4 to 5 feet from the base, it's starting to detach, meaning that it's natural bracing, which is something that occurs in trees where they've kind of grown together. And it's not necessarily considered a part of a natural structure, but it becomes a part of the natural structure in essence. And so that portion at the base of this tree near the union, or I should say unions, is starting to separate, which we'll see in the next photo, that there is a very notable separation in the main stems. And when you see separation at the base of a tree, when you can get to the union like this, a matter of inches at the base of the tree becomes feet at the top. And so once you start getting end weight of that nature, being in a mature tree that's dying in the upper crown, it's very concerning because all that weight is just hanging out up there. And without proper mitigation, such as end weight reduction pruning, any like annual aerial assessments by climbing the portions of the tree that are dying back to do an assessment to determine if the bark is delaminating or if that portion is just going to snap off in normal weather events. It's really difficult to determine how far this tree has gone since I have not looked at it every year. However, notably, there was some decay fungus at the base of this tree, mostly on the west side of the basal flare. And it was a very old and there wasn't anything new. So to me, what I see there is that it's likely that part of the root system has already begun decline and probably dying. And since that's on the west side, the eastern portion of the stem is the one that's dying back, which is also concerning since it's splitting in that direction towards the private property. So we have two different sides of this tree that are showing some pretty vast decay and separation. Nick, can you go to the next slide, please? So here on the left is kind of a portion of that natural bracing that I'm talking about. So a portion of the tree had originally kind of grown together as these stems were forming. And once you start seeing that separation, you have to take a look up and you take a look down and you really make a determination. Is this continuing forward in the sense of the separation? Can you see daylight through it? Which in that photo you definitely can, whereas years before you could not. Mary, the property owner, has spent decades staring at this tree, and she was very adamant, to take a look at this portion. And as we did, you can kind of see some pockets of decay where the natural bracing has now separated. And that basically cracking down the inclusion continued. And that's that photo in the second photo in the middle. Generally speaking, on any tree, whether it's heritage or not, once we start seeing cracking like this, it's really concerning because we can't make a determination of how long this overall structure is going to be able to be maintained as is, or if it's actually being managed by a professional. So there's a separation on that bark ridge that starts at the inclusion at the union and heads down the entire base of the stem to the buttress roots. And that's continued in that photo on the right. Those are two different sides of the tree. So you can see it's all the way through now. And at that point, it was really tough basically having to have this conversation with Mary that, the only way to really preserve this at this point and to keep things safe was to do a severe reduction on the side that was dying back. And by severe reduction, I basically mean removing enough weight and in some cases enough height on the portion that is dead or dying or dangerous, so that if it should fall on its own fruition or in a normal or abnormal weather event, that it will not hit any targets, being a fence or the neighboring home. And so at that point, leaving this tree standing as a heritage tree specimen, once that pruning has been provided, I'm not sure that it would be a very good specimen to remain as such a heritage tree designation. So Mary would like to pursue preservation throughout this process, regardless of today's vote. She would like to do whatever it takes to be able to maintain this tree as long as she lives and as long as this tree lives. She's willing to financially take on the burden to maintain this tree. But however, some of this pruning can be seen in different industries and cultures that, it's very severe when you have partial removal of a multi-stem tree like this. And it can be very aesthetically unpleasing at some points. But when it comes to safety and then tree preservation or retention, it's very important that this work is being done. And that work can include the pruning and weight reduction, as mentioned before. But sometimes cabling, whether it's static, putting in guy wires, drilling, dynamic cabling systems can be installed in this tree in addition to the end weight reduction. So once all those services are agreed upon and installed, then this tree could very easily be monitored and kept as much of the tree as possible for some time. However, keeping it as, again, a heritage tree, I'm not sure that would be a very good example thereof, not to mention it also being a backyard private tree. So these 3 photos are probably the best that we can do, being that without being there in person, but it's the most important photos, I would say, of my inspection process. Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan. And please note the Heritage Tree Committee was able to visit this tree at the end of our tour of nominated trees in July. The Heritage Tree Committee met with the property owner and viewed the tree. We agree with the urban forestry assessment and support the property owner request. The tree is in decline. The stems are separating, reducing structural integrity, and there's lack of sound wood for cabling as an option. There were 3 certified arborists, each tree risk assessment qualified in our committee tour. And we did speak with the property owner. As Dylan mentioned, Mary cares a whole lot about this tree, and she supports the wildlife that's around this tree and cares for keeping as much of it alive as possible as she can. And so that is why she is not submitting a request for removal, but rather a request for removal of designation. And so now next steps, and Vivek, I'll turn this over to you for Urban Forestry Commission discussion and questions, and then the motion to either A, recommend removal of designation to City Council, or B, not recommend removal of designation to City Council. And remember that the vote to remove shall be supported by at least 6 members of the UFC. Thank you.
Okay, any public comments on this one?
And this is not a public hearing. So the remove, so I just.
Removal is, right, thank you,
Yep.
thank you, right.
Yep.
Right, this is just for commissioners to deliberate. Any commissioner responses, thoughts, reactions to the assessment of 206 cherry tree?
Thanks, Dylan. That was a really detailed explanation. You did a great job. Thank you.
Megan.
Yeah, I also, Dylan, wonderful. I know a lot about trees, but I appreciate the level of detail to explain things. It's really helpful. But also talking about, I just appreciate kind of the homeowner's relationship, thinking about kind of the gradual process around this tree, how it can support wildlife. I manage a program that's all about supporting wildlife. And, kind of its transition. But I also really appreciate just the thought of, even if it's delisted, being able to just to retain a tree. So kind of a little bit of a different approach to that, and recognizing how challenging multi-stemmed trees are with, let alone a cherry. So yeah, just well done. And I actually really appreciate the process for this.
Wonderful, thank you, Megan, and Dylan, for this as well. I think if Mary's been staring at this for decades, there's probably a name for this tree, I suspect, as with the other dove tree. But nevertheless, we'll just call it 206 for our convenience today. Any other thoughts, reactions? Because otherwise, we'll call a motion to move forward on removal of designation or not removal of designation. My sense is that there's a lot of homework that was done, very clear, compelling argument for removal of the designation for this cherry tree 206. And let me ask for a motion. If I'm not seeing Megan, your hand's up from your previous comment, I think. Yeah. All right, Daniel.
Yeah, just a real quick question, and you might already mention this. What did the Heritage Tree Commission say about this?
The Heritage Tree Commission, committee.
Sorry.
Committee, yep, we viewed the tree and met with the property owner and support the recommendation by tree inspector and urban forestry management. And there was one more thing I was going to add, which I can't. Oh, yes, we have two cherry trees currently as heritage trees in our program. Again, similar to the dove tree, it's hard to see the loss of one of two of our specimen trees, but also I do like the idea that Megan brought up of memorializing the tree and also keeping a lookout for others that could fill this space.
Okay, thanks, Nick. I'll go ahead and make a motion to delist or to recommend to the council, city council, to delist.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Looks like Bruce, that's a finger up or two fingers up. Yep, that's a second. That's not peace to that motion. It sounds like a second for that motion. So let me call a vote then. All in favor, virtual or physical hand for the motion that's on the table. I see. Okay, any opposed? Okay, any abstentions from this vote? All right, so moved. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Dylan and Nick, for this 206 cherry tree. That was, so I'm amazed, you know, I have to just quickly say, I'm thoroughly amazed at how thoughtful, considerate, and incredibly generous the Heritage Tree staff in urban forestry is around this delisting process. It's really incredible. It really brings light to the fact that this is a community asset. We're really taking municipal attention to it, and it's kind of a process of really recognizing the value that trees play. And it really, just in the conversation and in this process, I feel like we're memorializing the trees in the heritage list that we have. So thank you so much for the deep and thoughtful assessment of this work, and I'm really grateful to have been part of it. As hard as it is to see trees delisted, it is amazing to watch them kind of get listed at one meeting and then delisted at another meeting, and kind of the kind of ebb of life and death is back on us as well. So thank you for all of that. I'm feeling really good about our timing today. It feels very feel like we're really moving right on time. We're with at 11:10 here on Pacific Standard Time. We're moving right in, unless there's anything else with Heritage Tree, Brian, Nick, that I'm missing. I'm ready to move the conversation to Roberta to give us an update and a request for the statement on climate emergency and resolution and action. I think you saw that again in your communication from Brian 6 days ago as a document that the policy committee really developed and Roberta championed. So thank you, Roberta, for that very detailed, thorough, and I personally feel very impressive response to this climate emergency from the Urban Forestry Commission. So can I turn it over to you for about 10 minutes of checking in with commissioners about this statement and anything else? And I think there's a vote here as well. You're requesting, as you commissioners may recall, we asked to move forward on this. I think it was last month, and so we're here to move forward with a document to send forward to council. Roberta.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, on behalf of the policy committee, we present this letter to you today. It does reflect comments and discussion at our last policy committee meeting, and the committee members reviewed 2 drafts of the proposal as well, or the letter prior to forwarding it to you. So just brief reminder, I want to spend about 3 minutes kind of going through some highlights just to make sure that folks are on board, because it is a rather strong statement from the Forestry Commission on this proposal. And it also provides us sort of an opportunity to be on the record and make statements that we can then leverage in the future, say for urban forest management plan and others. So other activities. The climate emergency work plan 2022 to 2025. So it is a 3-year work plan. It's led by the Bureau of Planning Sustainability and is proposed to be adopted by the City Council as a response to the climate emergency declaration of 2020, and also to serve as the city's updated climate action plan until a more comprehensive update is done in about 3 years, or started in about 3 years. So the City Council actually voted to adopt it in July, but then rescinded its vote to provide more time for written but not oral comments. And I did not have a chance to review that recording of that discussion, but apparently there was testimony in support of moving forward promptly on this work plan, but also a decision to get more comments. And I'm not sure exactly the amount of engagement that had been done to put together this work plan. There was quite a bit of engagement on the declaration of 2020. I'm not aware of any comment from this commission prior to now. So we are submitting rather late in the game because they're supposed to vote next week. But again, these are some important feedback, and hopefully they're going to get important feedback from others as well. And we'll make some revisions to this document to make it even better before it moves forward. So the overarching comment in the letter is that the Urban Forestry Commission supports the general direction and being ambitious and aspirational to move this type of work forward, but that though we do have significant concerns and are proposing some changes to make it a more effective work plan as it moves forward. So some general concerns highlighted in the letter are that many actions in the work plan lack specificity in terms of resource requirements and timelines that you expect to have for a 3-year work plan. Some actions provide clear intent, policy intent and direction, while others do not, including the actions relating specifically to trees. They are less specific than some of the other actions in the plan. The work plan does account some level of accountability in that it contains no process for tracking or reporting the progress on actions to council or the community, or commitment to public engagement. The actions probably have public engagement in them, we know that, but in terms of this kind of coordinated narrative, as they say, that doesn't appear to be any sort of coordinated tracking and reporting process. And the work plan doesn't include important guidance from the city's existing climate change preparation strategy, which does focus on resilience and adaptation to climate change, specifically actions to reduce impervious area that would make space for more trees, large trees, and reduce heat and associated health impacts. So the letter points out areas that the city appears to be omitting some important and rich direction that it established not that long ago. Some work plan specific highlights include a recommendation that to actions that relate directly and indirectly to trees and green infrastructure, including actions calling for the Urban Forest Management Plan update, the Title 11 update, and continued tree planting in East Portland and other tree deficient areas of the city. For those and others, we are proposing specific language revisions to incorporate stronger policy direction into the actions and to clarify timelines and staff and funding gaps. We recommend adding an action to evaluate potential street tree maintenance and programs and financing options and to make recommendations for those. And we emphasize that maintaining street trees as an important infrastructure asset is critical to improve Portland's resilience to climate change and to reduce inequities in tree canopy and financial burden. We're also emphasizing that point by asking that the tree-specific actions in the plan be included in the section of the work plan that addresses green infrastructure, uses that term. Right now, those are actually separate from the section that addresses green infrastructure. And we really want to keep beating the drum that, oh yes, trees are in fact part of the city's critical infrastructure and green infrastructure. And people need to sort of think of them that way and think about managing and maintaining them that way. We provided comments on actions related to natural resource protection, wildfire, and incorporating trees into the city's upcoming economic opportunities analysis, which we'll be hearing a lot more about soon. And last but definitely not least, we're proposing additional actions to promote depaving and tree planting in heat-prone areas and to consider establishing impervious area limits to provide space for trees and to reduce heat. Bruce has provided some minor editorial comments, a couple of typos and so forth. Grateful for that eagle eye, Bruce. And I propose that those be adopted. And before opening it for all the commissioners to discuss any additional thing that I missed from Daniel, Bruce, or Megan from the policy committee. So I don't see any hands. So open to questions, fielding comments, suggestions, etc.
When you said depaving, I thought yes. And maybe this letter doesn't get into this level of specificity, but the first thing I thought of was schoolyards. And Vivek talked to me about this and how it's like a sea of pavement. I don't know if we may not want to go to that level of detail, but that was my first thought was, kids not being able to go outside because it's hot and is there a way to emphasize depaving schoolyards and adding more trees there?
Is that just a question about that, Leah? I guess I'm just a little naive about the way that city offices work, but Portland Public, it's public schools, and city council. Is there a city council member that oversees Portland Public? I know Portland Public has a whole board in and of itself. So, like, is there any way that then one city group like schools could move? They don't need to have any, like, city council can't like direct Portland Public to do anything. So it might even be outside the purview of this letter, is my guess, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
So Leah, on your point, in the description of why we want this to be included, this work plan focuses on programs that are existing and underway already or planned to start within 3 years. And it does refer to Bureau of Environmental Services program already, which is working with community members to depave. And I know from talking with BES's Matt, who was on the 82nd Tree Walk with Bruce, that they are doing work in schools, particularly. And I could put a parenthetic in that where it talks about BES's program relating to depaving, saying including focus on schools and other public areas, and just kind of make it more real by saying that. And I think that that's a good point. So if you're good with that, why don't we do that?
Sorry, Megan, just a quick interjection. It might detract, Roberta, is my thought about that. It's like if a council commissioner, city council sees like, oh, schools in there as a potential, they're like, oh, okay, we're not in on that one, so we don't need to move forward. And that's my concern. Totally separate entities that they may feel less interested in wanting to move forward on. Again, sorry about my internet.
That's fine too. It's they're already doing that, and they are focusing on schools. And I think maybe we can learn more about that, Leah. And I know the state forester, who was also on that walk, the new urban forestry manager at Oregon Department of Forestry, is very interested in schools as well as the low-hanging fruit in this depaving effort. So you're in good company.
Megan.
Yeah, mine went, Roberta, I read through it. Normally I try to do it earlier, but I've been so busy, so apologies for these late comments. You did phenomenal. My one comment is really just about in both the trees and the natural resource protection section under number NR1, there's a space where it really talks about the importance of this for like fish and wildlife habitat, but it's kind of the only place. And I actually was chatting with a researcher that really talked about the importance of there's an overlay between our urban heat islands and where we need habitat connectivity corridors for bird migration. And I feel like we focus, I mean, clearly human health is important, but I think the wildlife habitat elements get a little lost in some of this. So in the Why It Matters section, if there's a way to ask to speak to that a little bit more, or even just within like the potential around some of these green infrastructure systems, a lot of the places we need that is in these very concrete heavy areas. So I don't know how to make that recommendation specifically, but I felt like it was lacking within those two areas.
Thanks, Megan. All right. Thank you, Roberta. It sounds like we've kind of come to a point where we are ready. Are you asking for a vote with these corrections from commissioners to move forward to City Council? I think that needs to happen.
So yeah, and one thing I would say is, and Megan, I guess I would be happy to work with you on coming up with kind of a phrase or something to add to that section if we can. My concern is that I'm actually out of town right now, and I think it's really important that this letter go out today, because the vote is next week, and I'm already concerned that it may not get the traction that it would have if it'd come in earlier, or if we'd had earlier input. So I'm hesitant to wait any longer. If you had language that you could give to Brian to drop into it, that was a phrase or two in that you think fits, I would support you and him in coming up with something like that. I can't integrate that right now. So, but yes, I think the commission should vote or authorize Vivek to go ahead and sign it. And if Megan, if you want to, in sort of short order, put something together, that would be great. So Vivek, do you want to, do you think does it require an official vote, or is it more of a consensus thing? Because it's not, I just don't know the procedure on.
Yeah, we do need to vote on this and authorize, we need to authorize a submission to City Council, from what I understand. That's generally what we've done in the past when policy committee has come to us. So I'd like, it doesn't sound like we're doing anything with this, any substantive revisions, though. Am I hearing otherwise, Roberta? Are there substantive revisions we want to make? I'd like to get this moving sooner than later.
Yeah.
Are they substantive enough to be able to need to revise and call another vote in September? But I'd rather move this.
No, the Bruce comments are minor editorial great catches, like a typo here and a typo there. And if Megan adds sort of a clarifying phrase to point to the importance of habitat corridors in the section she's referring to, I don't think I don't feel like that requires any additional review from me, unless the commissioners feel like that, or the commissioners.
I move that we approve the letter with, if Megan can come up with language, great. Otherwise, we approve the letter as edited.
All right, thanks, Bruce. Pending any revision, pending a minor revision from Megan. Anything, and anybody with a second? Yeah. Okay, Megan seconds. Great. All in favor, virtual or physical hand? Okay. All right. Any opposed? Yeah. All right. Any abstentions? Wow, we are a voting machine right now. Not in that way, but in like the rapid number of votes that we've done in a short amount of time. Excellent. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Roberta. Again, like awesome. Daniel, all the policy committee, like super props to you all for the incredible work on getting this letter over the last month out. And I think it's going to land really well, and the timing is really excellent. So thank you.
Although we had a lot of folks reviewing this, I do want to recognize that Roberta did the majority of the work on this project. So thank you, Roberta.
Amazing. We have a next item on our agenda. I want to kind of move just to really continue this tree planting discussion. We have just a little bit of time left, but I think just to maybe if you want to answer any of the questions that came up earlier, I think this is over to you, Jen. Any of the questions that came up earlier or kind of keep this conversation going, turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Vivek. And thank you, Roberta, Policy Committee and Commissioners for the letter. I think that's a great role for the commission to play in this project in particular. So I'm going to follow up on the questions that you all commissioners had about tree planting from the last meeting. And if there are more questions, if we can hear those today, or if there's not time to hear them today, please email them in to Brian, Vivek, and I. And we want to ensure accuracy when we bring back or send answers to those questions in the future. So I wanted to remind you, tree planting information is also provided in the online tree planting report, which is live year-round. It's updated annually, and it includes not only urban forestry's planting information, but other city planting activities, including BES. And the report is also presented to the commission annually and will be coming to the Forestry Commission as an agenda item in the next few months, as it has in the past. Okay, so the first question was from Megan, and rather than read it all verbatim for the sake of time, because that will be largely in the meeting minutes, I'm going to read, I think, the summary parts of it, which are the beginning and end. Perfect paragraph, Megan, good structure. I think my question is just that when we're going to have the opportunity to hear from all of the community groups doing this work, so when do we get to hear from those voices directly? Forestry Commission, as you know, is advisory to the City of Portland, first and foremost, to the City Forester and Urban Forestry. And the City Forester and Urban Forestry are the City of Portland's tree and forest managers. The Forestry Commission is advisory on city policies related to trees and to the urban forest. And we've heard the request to hear from urban forestry partners. As you know, Parks and Urban Forestry are focusing on growing partnerships with new levy funds, including planning to hire staff to lead those efforts in the near future. So the request to hear about community partnerships with community partners is therefore really timely. And thanks for bringing that up. Going forward, we'd like to work with the commission on how to do this. What are the goals of community partners presenting? What would those be? What would the desired outcomes be? How can it be structured to support the Urban Forestry Commission's advisory role to urban forestry and the city on city tree related policy? And with these, we should be able to highlight urban forestry partnerships, including inviting those partners to present their work with urban forestry in future commission meetings. So something to work on going forward. There was a second question. It was from Daniel. Again, I'm going to pick the highlights of that. It was basically that we've heard a lot about BES and Parks working together on transitioning some of the planting roles. It seems like it's been a long time. Also heard that there are going to be some new requests for proposals, so beginning of contract process going out, but you didn't say when it would happen. I'd be curious to know when it happened, when is the transition going to be complete, and when are the contracts going to be let? The response I have is a little bit longer, but the short version is we expect to be releasing the latest round of requests for proposals in 2023. Those are being structured to reduce or eliminate the barriers to participation for BIPOC-owned, women-owned, and small companies and organizations. And let's see. You also heard earlier in the meeting about BES's manager retiring in September, and therefore we have a faster timeline on getting the written coordination agreement together and plan to bring that to the commission with BES managers at that time. I had more on that, but for now we'll leave it there because we are at time and I have a hard stop. So if you have further questions, please email them on so we can start getting ready to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Lots to chew on there. Definitely aligned with our priority conversation as well. So appreciate the partnership mentioned. And thank you, commissioners. I'm glad I can end at 11:30 today and not stumble into the end as I did last month. And today was pat myself on the back for getting myself through with timing exactly as we had set up on the agenda. Brian, appreciate your help with that too. All right, thank you everybody for August 18th, 2022. Hope you all have a great rest of the summer, and let's keep in touch and keep the trees healthy and well, and like you all. Take care.
Water.
Close the meeting for today.
Check on
Everyone.
your neighbors.
Thank you. Water.
Everyone.